Get that patient to another ward, now. The command cracked through the emergency room like a whip. Monitors beeped. Orderlies froze. The man on the gurney groaned and tried to sit up. Dr. Adrian Carter stood under the fluorescent lights, still in his crisp white coat, the edges spotless despite the chaos. He glanced at the nurse holding the chart and frowned. No insurance ID, no referral, and you brought him straight to trauma? We have paying surgeries backed up. Doctor, he's in shock, she said. Possible internal bleed. Then let General handle it. I'm not signing off until we know who he is. The nurse's jaw clenched. His name's Rivers. That's all I got before he blacked out. Dr. Carter checked his watch. Then he can wait. Every inch of the ward was noise, pagers, rubber soles, rolling carts. But around the gurney, a small silence grew. The patient's hand slipped from the oxygen mask. His knuckles were scraped raw, suit torn at the shoulder, wristband from a conference still on. Nurse Helena snapped, "Doctor, he's crashing!" Carter exhaled sharply, frustration more than fear. "Fine, prep for scan, but I'm logging this as unverified admit." As they wheeled the gurney toward radiology, the man's wallet slid from the torn jacket and hit the floor with a soft smack. No one noticed, except a janitor sweeping behind them. He picked it up, eyes catching on the embossed cord inside. Hospital credentials. Same institution. Same logo. The janitor blinked, reading the name again. Dr. J. Rivers, Cardiology Division Chief. He looked up, stunned at the departing surgeon. In the scan room, Carter barked orders, irritation hiding nerves. He didn't like when cases went off book. The unknown made him clumsy. Contrast dye, ultrasound feed, vitals dropping. Pressures at 60. He needs surgery now. Carter hesitated. The chart was still blank under primary care affiliation. He was thinking paperwork, risk, not pulse. "Doctor!" Helena shouted, cut through his calculation. He grabbed the scalpel. "Fine, get him to OR2. 20 minutes later, blood-filled suction lines. Carter's gloved hands moved automatically, steady from decades of repetition. A ruptured spleen, a torn vessel, nothing unusual, until he glimpsed the ID card on the tray beside the patient's personal effects. The gold hospital seal caught the light. He froze. Rivers, Jamal, MD, Chief of Cardiology. The suction hissed, monitors chirped, and for the first time in his career, Adrian Carter felt the cut of shame deeper than any incision. He finished the operation in silence. When they wheeled Dr. Rivers to recovery, Carter followed without a word. The hallway seemed to narrow around him, every face an accusation. Helena looked at him, eyes hard. "You just refused to treat one of our own." Carter stared at the floor. "No," he said quietly, though even he didn't believe it. "I just didn't see him."
Morning rounds had barely started when the gossip reached every corner of St. Mark's Medical. In the cafeteria, nurses whispered over burnt coffee. In the ICU corridor, interns pretended to scroll charts while listening. Dr. Carter turned away a trauma case last night. Patient nearly coded before he agreed to operate. And get this, patient's a department head. By the time Carter walked through the main hallway, the air felt charged. Conversations paused as he passed. He'd spent 20 years building a reputation as a brilliant but distant surgeon. Today, that distance looked more like guilt. He stepped into the recovery ward. Monitors beeped softly. On the far bed lay Dr. Jamal Rivers, pale but conscious, IV lines looping from his arm. His eyes opened when he heard footsteps. Carter froze. He'd planned to leave a note, maybe flowers, anything that didn't require facing the man whose life he'd nearly cost. "Morning," Rivers rasped, voice rough but steady. "You the one who finally decided I was worth cutting open?" Carter's throat tightened. Yes, you're stable now." Rivers gave a slow nod. "You ever think how small this world is, doctor? 1 minute you're deciding who deserves care, next minute your scalpel's in the chief of cardiology's chest." The words weren't angry. They were calm, surgical. They landed deeper than a shout ever could. Carter moved closer. I didn't know who you were. That's the problem, Rivers said, eyes still closed. You needed to. 2 hours later, Carter sat before the hospital's review board. Sunlight slashed across the long mahogany table. Vargas, the hospital director, tapped a pen against her pad. Dr. Carter, she began, protocol requires that you justify last night's delay in treatment. You're aware your patient nearly suffered cardiac arrest before surgery. He nodded, hands clasped. Yes, ma'am. And your reason for refusing intake? He hesitated. The chart was incomplete. I followed policy. Rivers' voice came from the corner of the room, weak but firm. Policy didn't stop you from operating once you saw my ID. The room went silent. Even Vargas stopped tapping her pen. Carter looked at him. You're right. After the hearing, the hallway felt colder. Carter caught up to Rivers as orderlies wheeled him back toward recovery. I came to apologize, not to save face, to understand why I froze. Rivers studied him. Then start with this. Imagine I wasn't a doctor. Imagine the same injuries, same chart, but a factory worker instead of a colleague. Would you have let him die on a technicality? Carter's voice cracked. No. I hope not. That uncertainty, Rivers said, is why people fear hospitals more than illness. You can't heal people you've already judged. The gurney rolled forward. Carter stood still, the words echoing like a diagnosis. Back in his office, Carter stared at the glass cabinet lined with awards. They looked smaller now, trophies for precision, not compassion. On his desk lay a folder labeled Peer Ethics Seminar. He opened it, eyes catching on the phrase Bias Awareness Training, mandatory for all staff. He sighed, took out a pen, and wrote across the cover, Add me first. Then he turned off the light. The ward was quiet, machines humming softly. Carter entered Rivers' room again, this time without the coat, without pretense. Rivers looked up from the monitor screen. Couldn't sleep either? Carter pulled up a chair. No, thought I'd check vitals, yours and mine. A faint smile touched Rivers' lips. Vitals are fine. Reputation's your problem. They both chuckled, tired, honest laughter that cracked the tension. Carter leaned forward. I need to say it directly. I saw you and thought, admin trouble, lost paperwork, not priority. I let arrogance decide speed. That's on me. Rivers nodded. Good. Now do something useful with the guilt. How? Teach your interns what you learned today. Let them see a mistake fixed, not buried. Carter exhaled, slow relief flooding his shoulders. Deal. As dawn crept through the blinds, the hospital intercom announced the new shift. Nurses moved quietly between beds. Rivers slept again, steady heartbeat tracing green lines across the monitor. Carter stood in the doorway, watching. The same machine that had screamed warnings hours earlier now sang a calm rhythm. He whispered, mostly to himself, next time, no hesitation. Behind him, the Holloway lights flickered on one by one, sterile, bright, and strangely hopeful.
The morning light bled into the glass corridors of St. Mark's. Dr. Carter walked fast, head down, coat unbuttoned, the same halls that once bowed to his confidence, now whispering in his wake. Everyone knew what happened. The news had leaked quietly, a senior surgeon refusing a case, a patient nearly dying, the irony of the name on the ID card. He stopped outside the conference room. Inside, interns filled the seats. Their chatter died the moment he stepped in. Carter stood at the front, took a breath, and placed his clipboard down. I made a mistake, he said. His voice didn't tremble. It carried the weight of something finally real. Last week, I refused to treat a man because his file was incomplete, because I assumed the worst instead of asking one more question.
The room was still. The youngest intern, a woman with dark hair tied in a bun, frowned. "Sir, that could have been any of us. The ER gets chaotic." He nodded. "Yes, and chaos doesn't excuse arrogance. We build habits in calm moments that either save lives or cost them in the storm." He turned on the screen. A frozen frame from the OR camera filled the wall. Carter bent over the table, face pale, hands mid-operation. "That's me," he said, "operating on the man I almost killed with the decision I made 10 minutes earlier." He let that image sit in the silence. "The patient is alive because a nurse refused to obey my hesitation. I've already thanked her privately. Now I'm thanking her publicly. Let that be your reminder. Titles don't equal wisdom." The intern stared. No one dared take notes. Carter shut the projector off. "You'll read about protocols. You'll memorize anatomy. But the hardest thing to learn is how to see people before their paperwork. If you can't do that, don't put on the coat." He left the room before anyone could applaud. Outside, he leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. The noise of monitors and carts filled the hallway, but somewhere underneath was a rhythm that sounded like peace. By noon, he found himself standing again outside Rivers's room. The blinds were open this time. Sunlight spilled across the bed. Rivers looked stronger, a tablet balanced on his lap, typing one-handed. "You're trending," Rivers said dryly. "Half the hospital's calling you brave." Carter managed a small smile. "That's generous. Foolish fits better." Rivers set the tablet down. Brave and foolish usually live in the same house. They shared a quiet laugh. Carter pulled up a chair. "The board cleared me. Probation, ethics retraining, public lecture series." Rivers raised an eyebrow. "They're making you teach a class about bias?" "Volunteered before they could assign it." Rivers studied him for a long moment. "You know, when I woke up that first time, I wanted to make you an example. Strip your license, drag your name through every journal." Carter nodded. "Would have been fair." Rivers shook his head slowly. "But then I thought, what's better, punishment or progress? You can't scare empathy into people. You teach it." Carter's throat tightened. "Then let me try." Rivers smiled faintly. "Good, because I already emailed the director. You're co-hosting next month's grand rounds with me. Title simple, The Cost of Assumption." Carter chuckled. "You plan fast for a man still on IV." Rivers gestured to the monitors. "Healing's just data. Reform's the real surgery." The words landed deep. Later that week, the two men stood side by side in front of the hospital press wall. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted questions. Carter answered each one with quiet precision. No excuses, no polished lines, just the truth. "I didn't fail because of bad data. I failed because of bad instinct. This hospital will never let that happen again." The crowd murmured. A flash went off. Rivers spoke next, steady and calm. "Forgiveness isn't letting someone off the hook. It's giving them a hook to pull others out." That line became the headline. By evening, Carter walked home through the parking lot alone. Rain began to fall in slow, soft streaks. He didn't rush. For once, the sound didn't remind him of operating room machines. It sounded like rhythm, like a pulse returning. He reached his car, paused, and looked back at the glowing hospital windows. Somewhere inside, interns were still whispering his name, but not out of fear anymore, out of something like respect. He whispered to the night, "Lesson learned." Then he started the engine and drove into the rain, headlights cutting through water and light like forgiveness finding its way forward. Rain tapped against the windows of the university lecture hall. Inside, the room was full. Students, doctors, administrators, every seat taken. The banner behind the podium read, "The Cost of Assumption, National Ethics Symposium." Dr. Rivers adjusted the microphone, his right hand still faintly scarred from surgery. "3 months ago," he began, I lay on an operating table, wondering if the man standing over me would treat me as a body or as a person. Today, that same man stands beside me to teach every one of you why those are not the same thing. Applause rolled through the hall, not loud, but steady like a heartbeat. Dr. Carter stepped forward. The lights caught the silver in his hair. I spent 20 years chasing perfection. My cuts were straight, my sutures clean, my charts flawless. But I learned that precision means nothing if you're wrong about the person you're saving. He paused, looking over the audience. Rows of young faces, eyes bright, pens still. We call it bias, but it's really blindness. You don't see what's there. You see what you expect. And when that happens in a hospital, it doesn't just cost dignity, it costs lives. He gestured to Rivers beside him. He saved mine, not with surgery, with mercy. The room went quiet. Rivers smiled, small but sincere. Redemption isn't a headline, it's a habit. A student raised her hand. Dr. Carter, how do you know if you've changed? He thought for a moment. When you stop needing a crisis to remind you to care. The answer drew murmurs of agreement. After the lecture, they stood by the exit shaking hands with attendees. Nurses thanked them. Medical students asked for copies of their presentation. One older physician gripped Carter's hand longer than expected. You said out loud what most of us hide behind confidence. That takes more courage than any operation. Outside, the rain had stopped. The two men walked side by side across the courtyard, the wet pavement glowing under the streetlights. Rivers spoke first. You know, the board wants this training program national. Mandatory modules, case studies, real accountability. Carter nodded. About time hospitals started treating empathy like anatomy. Rivers chuckled. You're good with words when you're not cutting people open. Carter smirked, trying a different kind of healing. They reached the parking lot. Rivers stopped by his car, hand on the door. We did something today, Adrian. Something that sticks. Carter nodded slowly. Yeah, and maybe that's enough. Rivers smiled, then got in, headlights flashing once before fading down the drive. Carter stood there for a moment longer, rain's slick wind brushing across his face. The world felt quieter, lighter. He looked up at the hospital skyline in the distance, the same building that had once mirrored his arrogance, now shining with a softer light. He whispered almost to himself, one mistake, one lesson, one better world. Then he walked to his car, coat collar turned up, city lights reflecting in the puddles like a pulse that refused to stop. Fade out.